Are you attracting narcissists like a magnet? If so, what is it about you that makes you look like such a juicy, tasty, scrumptious snack to a predatory abuser? Well, stick around and find out.
The Narc Ninja, bringing you the tools and tactics to heal and deal with users and abusers. And now the Narc Ninja himself, Christopher Fairchild.
Welcome to the second video in this special 10-part series on recognizing and dealing with narcissists called the Narc Ninja 101 Survival Guide. Today I want to talk to you about character disordered, toxic, manipulative people out there and why they may be picking you out of the crowd. But before we get started, I need to ask you to please subscribe, like, share, leave a comment, and hit that bell. Okay, let's get to it. Do you remember when you first heard your recorded voice? Were you really thrilled, or were you kind of surprised at how you sounded? Turns out who we are on the inside and how we come across on the outside are not always the same thing. Ultimately, one of my questions for you today is it possible that there's something about how you're generally perceived that may be making you a bit of a target for those hater, baiter, dictator, agitators, always looking for people they can, really work with? Some warning signs that you are dealing with a highly narcissistic person may be things such as feeling that they run a little bit hot and cold. Maybe you feel a bit idealized at one moment, maybe even adored, and then the next feeling somehow devalued. And you never know which version's going to maybe show up. That feeling like you're walking on eggshells, or having your basic boundaries ignored or overlooked. Finding yourself being more useful for them than you ever wanted to be. Those are just a few things that you might be wanting to be looking out for. Especially sometimes early on when they're in that love bombing or seduction phase, it may be really hard to tell even what's going on. But here's the thing, for me personally, when I've been in that phase, I can look back and I can see, I may not have had the words yet or the thoughts to put together, but my gut somehow always knew that something wasn't quite right. But because, maybe my brain hadn't caught up with my gut, I tended to ignore those quiet intuitions and that still small voice inside. I suppose sometimes it was because, frankly, I was enjoying the love bombing and all the really great things they were saying about me. What I didn't know was that this was all happening because they had already assessed my usefulness as some form of narcissistic supply. What I didn't know was that my perceived usefulness had made me their target. What I didn't know was this is the first step in the abusive narcissist predatory pathology. They were defining me, they were assessing my value, and their end goal ultimately was for me to eventually surrender my own sense of self over to them and their manipulatively fickle judgment. They were hoping I would then count on them to tell me what my value and worth was. Can you see what tasty narcissistic supply that is to them? I'm sure some of you can already see how this can dovetail into some very unhealthy childhood experiences. For instance, this morning, let's say dad says you're a good boy or girl right now. Not just because you're naturally good and loved, not just because of your intrinsic value and dignity, hello, as a living human being. No, because you spilled the milk, the weather can change on a dime. And now dad, or maybe even mom, is scaring you a little bit with their horrifying newfound assessment of your current valuelessness. So who you are at, say, 6 years old is only deemed good if you do all the right things. And all of it's transactional, and love is only parceled out in exchange for your ability to be successfully obedient. Not just love and snuggles for love's sake. Now, if this sounds like you, I really want you to start looking at what ideas maybe you have gotten from those experiences, not only about yourself, but about life, and what choices you may have made about your sweet self in your 6-year-old head back then that you might still be walking around with today. The outcome of all of this on a kid is a very sort of a self-approval transference. But where there is loving care and attention that is healthy and not transactional, we do develop a positive and functional sense of ourselves. If not, if you still carry around some of those wounds, then you may be walking around with a target on your back and you don't even know it. To narcissistic manipulators, all these years later, you are already vulnerable to care more about what they think about you than you do. And that urgent thirst, that seeming necessity for some outside approval can become some very tight strings on the puppet. And that, I mean you. And they get a real treat, maybe their favorite, and that's getting to control, manipulate, and dominate you, someone, or anyone. Oh, and you may get a little treat sometimes of some intermittent approval, a tiny snack for you that only comes randomly. Now, there's a real chance that they have suffered some of this same abuse from their parents, and while it doesn't excuse their behavior, it does help explain it. We're going to be getting into that in the very next video called What Makes a Narcissist. In simple terms, your pain is their narcissistic supply, their food. And they feed on your emotional responses, your upset, your unquenched emotional needs, their dominance over you, your powerlessness. Oh, and if you have any shame available, they would love to munch on that too. Even unconsciously, they are always hunting for more ego-fluffing narcissistic supply. Now, look, we are all participating in and co-creating our life experiences, and taking personal responsibility and growing our awareness is the flashlight on that path to healing. The more we learn and know about every dark corner of this ever-growing thing called narcissism, the safer we are and the more healed we become. The following is just a peek into possibility. It's not a checklist of qualifiers. It's more of a jumping off point to deeper self-awareness and understanding. And we're all on this list in some way, some very specifically. Some of us maybe just have a touch of a few items on the list in a mix of varying degrees and shades of gray. So let's take a good look at who it is we're being or perceived as being that may be attracting so many bees to our honey. And by bees, I mean cluster B personality disordered folks. So here's my ever-growing list of traits that seem to attract these sorts of people, and please help me by adding to this list below. Okay, here we go. Are you, have you been, or could you be perceived as having low, vague, or intermittent boundaries? Are you a nurturing caregiver, maybe to a fault? Do you have a hard time saying no? Are you an adult child of a narcissist? Or an adult child of an alcoholic, a workaholic, sex, shop, rageaholic? Are you a child abuse survivor? Were you repeatedly bullied as a child? Do you identify as being shy or introverted? Are you an empath or HSP, a highly sensitive person? By the way, science shows that some people are even as much as 20% more neurologically sensitive than the rest of us. Do you have the disease to please, aka a people pleaser or a codependent? Did you suffer any early childhood trauma? Were you put in an age-inappropriate role as a child, let's say a parent-child role reversal, for instance? Do you have or have you suffered with low self-esteem? Do you appear to have little or no support system? Are you above average attractive or achieved? Are you an award winner or a person of some note? Have you been the peacekeeper, scapegoat, or lost child in a dysfunctional family role? Do you regard yourself as being an open-hearted individual? Are you a caring and loving person willing to sacrifice for others? Do you have strong, lifelong values and morals? Have you ever had a stuttering issue? Are you disabled in a visually obvious way? Are you in some sort of leadership role? Are you attracted to the bad boys or girls? Did either or both of your parents never really connect with you or be emotionally available, maybe due to an illness, work, or some addiction? Were you sexually abused as a child? So that's just a start. please add to this list in the comments below. I would love to hear what you have to say, and I will be reading some of your comments as we go along here. I hope that you noticed that the majority of things on that list were actually some really great positive traits. In fact, they are often drawn to us because we possess everything they'll never have. Real values, compassion, empathy, respect, willingness to sacrifice for the greater good, honor, the ability to love. You know, on some level, they hate us for the exact same things that attracted them to us. If you're going to join me through this whole series, which I certainly hope you do, there will be times when you will be really surprised at how specific this stuff gets. Research shows actually that chronic narcissistic behavior is extremely consistent, darn near unchanging and universal. And that's really great news for those of us who are Narc Ninjas in training, because we can learn those identifiers and choose what to do from an informed perspective. Next up, what is the latest cutting-edge science on how these narcissistic behaviors are developed? In other words, how is a narcissist created? I hope you found this helpful. If so, please like, comment, share, subscribe, hit that bell. Until the next time, thank you so much for watching. Keep your glow on and be you to the full.